Hi guys, my name's Josh, obviously, and I'm here to introduce the topic for the evening. So, whilst Mandy and Fung are going to go through how to do various things with animations and transitions and that sort of stuff later on, I'm going to go through a bit more about the how, the why, the why, the when, and the where. Why, the when, and the what. Get my thing right. Anyway, so, to start off, before we can even discuss why we should use animation, we should really have a pretty robust understanding of what it really is. So, animation is a way for us to give additional context to the user and in relation to the visual elements that we've created. So, to us, it's all about JavaScript and CSS. But it's actually a pretty old concept. So there are examples of animation way back to about 5,000 years ago where they're like spinning images on a pot. And whilst that might seem really far-fetched from what we do today, it's actually, the ideas behind it are kind of the same. Animation is powerful because it can create the illusion of life. So for thousands of years, we've been using animation as a technique to give the illusion of movement and to simulate life. We add animation to make more sense to these visual representations, and we breathe life into these creations to make them take new meaning. So one of the first things we're going to achieve with animation is causality. So when one thing happens just before another, our brains infer that the two things are related and that the first caused the second. So for example, if we can animate something coming from something else, and that infers causality. Feedback. Feedback is when something indicates to the user that their actions have triggered a response. For example, when you click a button and the button changes as a result. Progression. Animation can generate a sense of progress. Best example of that is the good old-fashioned progress bar. When one thing, it lets us know that things are happening, and it gives us an indication of when a certain task is going to be completed. And visual continuity, which allows us to see where an element has come from and where it goes. So rather than things just popping up and disappearing all over the place, we can get a clear understanding of where things are coming from and where they're going. So why should we use animation? There are a couple of benefits to animation, which I'm sure you're all aware of. The main use for animation is to improve user experience. Now, user experience is probably one of the most important things that we do on the web. And animation can really help with that because it makes it that much more enjoyable and gives valuable feedback and context to the user, which also increases engagement. If someone's more excited about viewing a website, they're going to be more engaged. And if they're more engaged, they're going to pay more attention and retain more of that information. So you could be trying to tell someone the most important stuff they've ever needed to know, but if they're not engaged, they're not going to soak it in. It doesn't really matter what you're saying. Animation can get your message across more effectively, which is pretty much saying the same thing. But it can also lead to more conversions, more sales, more clicks, more inquiries and leads, which is pretty important if you're working in an agency and you've got clients and you want to improve value. There are some considerations when you're using animations. So the first one is performance. If you add too many animations, it can start to slow down your website, which can have a negative effect on your user experience, and by causing frustration due to long load times and poor performance. Support is another important thing to consider. So not everyone's going to be able to access the animations that you're using. Even though it supports a lot wider now than it ever has been, but there are still a few hiccups, so always make sure you've got the appropriate fallbacks in place. Time and budget constraints. So it's all well and good that we want to do all these great things. We've got these brilliant creative ideas in terms of animation in our websites, but if we can't prove that value, then there's no real point doing it. We need to be able to we need to make sure that what we're doing has meaning and is actually going to improve the user experience. So SEO, this is one that a lot of people don't really realize, is that when you're using animations, if it's something that's actually conveying an important piece of content, Google and bots can't read animations. So it's really important to have accessibility as well. So you can make sure that even if you're trying to convey some information through an animation, you need to have some sort of consideration for the SEO ramifications of that, as well as the accessibility. So, since animation's so great, we should just use it everywhere, right? Animate all the things. I can't talk about animation without having this up there. But, yes. Too much of a good thing can be bad for you. All things in moderation. Oh, that one's not working. Come on. That's meant to, I'm sure you've all seen it before. Hey?
You didn't have your fallbacks in place?
I didn't have my fallbacks in place. So we shouldn't just apply animations for the hell of it. We should have good reasons for what we do and have a carefully considered approach to where, when, why we apply these animations. So to attract attention. When to use animations to attract attention. This is probably one of the most straightforward ones. If you want people to notice something on your website or your app for some reason, you can animate it to make it move slightly, which will catch their attention. Sort of like, you've probably seen examples on websites where the text sort of appears as you're reading it, and that sort of attracts the user's attention towards that. When to use animations to give feedback to the user. Now this is sort of same as what I've explained a couple of times now, but if any element on your website is changing from one state to another, it's pretty important that you show some sort of meaningful transition between the two states. And this makes it work a lot better. It fits our heads a lot better, makes it feel more real, and gives us context as to where things are coming from, where they're going, and that sort of thing. So this is mostly to do with CSS transitions, and I've got an example for this one actually. So here's a website that has some pretty nice transitions on it. For example, when you open up the menu, it's a performance thing, so gotta consider that. No. Well, that's supposed to slide out. Anyway, I'll show you sorry, there's another example here on this same website. So when you hover over this, the text sort of comes out of it, and it makes it feel like it's giving you feedback as to where what's happening when you're hovering over it. That's a really nice subtle animation. And it gives feedback to the user. Distracting users during load times. So sometimes distraction sounds like a bad word, but sometimes it's a good thing, because if your site's if something's going to take a while to load, if you can fill that gap with a nice animation, it makes it feel like less of a wait. To explain a concept. So animation is a really great tool to explain certain concepts, or even to sell your product for you. Kind of like videos, but instead you're using an animated element on your website or app. So sort of thing like, if a picture is worth 1,000 words, how many words is a moving picture worth? And I've got an example of that too, which is all about coffee. And this animates as you scroll down. And this is just giving a really great representation of how they make coffee. Things are moving about.
That's cool.
It's pretty awesome. And it really illustrates that point really effectively. And it sticks with you. You're engaged. You'll remember that.
Just a question, how well do you find that particular site performs well? Because a few sites have tried this, but again, they've had a performance problem.
Yeah, it's better on a Mac, because the scroll here is a bit jumpy, unless you're actually dragging it. Yeah. So you can use animation to explain a concept. And lastly, to make things fun and interesting. So it's not all about serious concerns and making sure that it all makes sense. Sometimes it's about just making it feel magical, and that itself increases engagement and improves the user experience. But the same things we can use to improve our user experience can also work against us if they're implemented incorrectly. You should always avoid distraction. Try not to take too much attention away from the key elements that you're trying to feature on your website or app. If you've got a really great animation on the page somewhere, but that's somewhere else as opposed to where you actually want, or the meaningful content is, it's not actually helping you, it's hindering you. Don't make users wait unnecessarily. Sometimes we get so caught up in our great ideas that we will come up with this awesome animation, but in reality, when a user's looking at it, they're just frustrated. They want to get to the content. They don't want to sit there and wait 5 seconds for an animation, which I have a really great example of. This actually won the Web Award for animation, this website. But when you click on the About tab, or any of the tabs, it takes a good 5 seconds for the animation to play through. I want to read the content. It's frustrating. It's a beautiful animation, but it takes a long time. Frequency is important here as well. It might be worth it to have a really long animation, but just once. But if it happens every single time you've got to click a button, something like that, it starts to really wear down the user and destroy that user interface, and user experience. So always keep an eye on performance. So I touched on this before. Shouldn't use an animation if it's just really going to bloat your page speed. It's pretty straightforward. If it's going to break your whole website, you probably shouldn't be doing it. So always keep that in consideration. And don't overdo it. Too many moving elements on a site at any given time will be way too distracting. It ties in with the top. So, idealism versus realism. At the end of the day, we all have a finite amount of time to spend on any one project or animation or whatever you're doing. Sure, it would be great if we could spend hours, days, weeks, months, or even years perfecting all of these experiences. And if you have the opportunity to do that, then go right ahead. But usually in a professional environment, we have deadlines to meet, differing opinions between stakeholders to consider, and budget constraints to work within. We need to use our time as a resource and balance all of our creative ideas and desires with the limitations we have to work within. We need to be judicious with our use of animation and focus on getting the most out of the effort that we put in, and always make sure that you're doing it in a valuable way. And final thought, work with a designer. I know this is a front-end development meetup, and I know we do have a few designers here, which is fantastic. Animation on websites and apps usually isn't thought about until it gets to the front-end developer, which I think is a bit of a backward way of thinking about it. Animations work best when they fit seamlessly with the rest of the website or the project, rather than when they feel like they're bolted on. And it all starts with an idea, and the earlier in that project that idea is implemented, and the more polished and refined and integrated it is with the rest of the project. Just work together with your designers and your project managers and your UX designers to come up with great ideas. Talk to them about animations, encourage them to come up with some cool ideas, get excited about it, and we should hopefully have a much better product in the end. So thanks for listening, and now that I've spoken about when and where, Fung's going to talk about how to implement some animations.